components required of. We're going to be learning about the necessary components required of engaging tasks so the students will begin to take greater ownership of their learning and be responsible for their own learning. I want to take a few minutes to talk about this. When I first began teaching, like I would say in my first 4 years, this was really hard for me to do. It was very difficult for me to do only because I had a hard time letting go, and I wanted to control everything in the classroom. But what I found out is that as I began to do a little bit more engaging tasks with my students, a great thing started to happen. Like the ownership of learning started to shift more to the students. It did take a little bit of time to set it up, but gradually by my 5th, 6th, 7th and on year, it began to flow like butter. So the reason why I put will begin is because we're on a journey and we're on a journey together. And for some of you, it may just take a little bit of time, but that's okay. So how will we know that we're successful in meeting our learning intentions today? Well, you'll be able to explain key components of an engaging task. You'll be able to create learning opportunities that incorporate the right level of rigor for your students. And you'll be able to describe the role of teacher clarity and the learner's level of engagement. So before we begin, what I want us to do is I want us to go back to talk about what we had talked about earlier with Dr. John, which was the science of learning. I'd like for you guys to take a couple of minutes as we're doing kind of like a decoding and encoding process to kind of fill in the blank and to think about it. Think about what these blanks might be. Please take a couple of minutes to do this. Oops. All right. Getting students to initially engage in the classroom is important because the student brain can only learn simple things under poor conditions. Initial engagement activity activates our working memory system. Initial engagement facilitates retrieval or recall of prior knowledge. If a student buys into classroom activities, the student is more likely to engage in critical thinking. Furthermore, students are more likely to take academic risk. And one strategy for establishing initial engagement is novelty. All right, the next slide that I want to go over with you is I want to talk a little bit about the newest research that is coming out from the University of Oklahoma. And what this is about is there's a thing called agentic engagement. Can all of you go ahead and write in the chat room, agentic, please? Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, guys. That comes from actually student agency. And what this talks about, the research from the University of Oklahoma, talks about how there are 4 dimensions that are necessary to engage students. They talk about emotional engagement. That is, how are students feeling at this point in time? And with those of you who joined us earlier, this is when Heather talked about setting up an emotionally safe classroom. Effective engagement is more like the social and emotional regulation of engagement. And it's making the students feel as though the intrinsic motivation. So many of us, for instance, when we were doing virtual learning, had to tap into this because we wanted to make sure that students were intrinsically motivated, because it was really, really hard for us to extrinsically motivate students when we were far away from them. Cognitive engagement talks about how are students learning, what are they learning, and how do they go deeper with that learning. That's what cognitive engagement is all about. Behavioral engagement talks about what do the student behaviors look like. Are they following classroom procedures? Are they following activities? Are they engaged in the activities? Are they engaged in the classroom? So when you have engaging tasks, what ends up happening is you're going to have these 4 dimensions going on with your students. In the next slide, please, there is some research. In the next slide, please. There's some research by Amy DeBerry. And Amy Berry's research comes out of the University of Melbourne in Australia. And what they talk about here is that she talks more about that engagement. She interviewed about 15 preschooler teachers, and they labeled what engagement was. There's engagement that was both active and passive, and she had 6 drivers that dealt with engaging. So we always want to help get our students more to the participating, investing, and driving, but you still can have someone that's passive and still participating. Let me give you an example. This is a true story. So I was in my 4th year of teaching. I kid you not, my 4th year of teaching, and in comes the secretary, who's the secretary of my principal. And she comes in and she politely knocks on the door and she pulls me out of class. And she said, Lisa, the principal needs to see you in a couple of minutes. We need to see you down there in about 5-10 minutes. So there'll be someone in the classroom that will come and take care of your classroom for you. And I'm thinking, oh my God, all right, I'm getting fired right now. It's finally happening. Oh my God, I'm getting fired. So right now, even though I may be participating with my students, I'm passively participating. I'm not fully engaged with my students. Only come to find out that later on they wanted to surprise me with a teaching award. I almost had a heart attack because all I could remember was that yesterday there was a student who brought in, I kid you not, rolling dice, a Playboy magazine, some alcohol, also some cigarettes, all in one day. So I was thinking that's what is being called into the office for. All that was missing was just a gun. That was all that was missing, but he had everything all together. Okay, so the Playboy magazine topped it off and is rolling dice. Okay, so this was an 8th grade student. So I thought, oh Lord. So the example that I also want to give when it comes to you guys in the classrooms and working with students, let's say you're teaching high school students. All of a sudden, as you're changing classrooms, there's a text that's received by one of the students. Let's say it's Amy. Amy receives something from her long-term boyfriend that they're going to break up. And she comes into your math class and you're about to start a really wonderful lesson on quadratic equations. Forget about it. She is not going to be, she's more on the disengagement side. So she may be participating, but it may be more passive. So this is what it comes to mean in the work of engagement. And so when we want to design task, next please, when we want to design task, next Bailey, what we want to do is we want to try and have tasks that actively engage our learners. This has an effect size of 1.33 from John Hattie's work. And what it is, that's about 3 years of accelerated learning, within 1 year, since 0.4 happens to be the hinge point. Now, another thing that's also interesting about this is this also comes from the work of Dr. John Almarode when he talks about assessment capable learners. Assessment capable learners also have an effect size of 1.33 because emotionally they're involved, intrinsically they're involved in learning, and they know where to go next. So we've talked about the what. We're going to be learning about putting together task. We learned the why because of the engagement and because of the student outcome that it does. Now we're going to begin to talk about the why. Next, please. So I love this quote, and this quote actually comes from Patricia Wolf. She talks about 2 factors strongly influence whether the brain initially attends to arriving information or whether this attention will be sustained. Who can tell me, could you write down in the chat what you think those 2 factors might be? What do you think those 2 factors might be, please? Go ahead and put it in the chat, whatever you think. Okay, motivation, I'm hearing. Environment, safety, motivation, interest, mindset, safety, belief. Okay, excellent. Buy-in, love it. readiness. Actually, her research shows, go ahead, Bailey, it is meaning and emotion. And it's the reason why is because, go ahead, Bailey. The reason why is because it has to answer the question of why is something important? Next. How is it personally relevant to you? And also, why is it worthy of attention? So what we're going to be doing today, just so that you know, is we're going to be talking about why this is important, and then how do you go about doing this? And so, again, it's meaning and emotion, and how do you put all of this research that we've gotten from DeBerry, from the University of Oklahoma, how do you go about doing that? How do you go about doing that in tasks that you've learned? So at this point in time, if you don't mind, please think about one thing that you've just learned or resonated with you, and please put that in the chat. I mean, novelty, emotion, each aspect of engagement plays a role in the success criteria, the importance of novelty, for paying attention, the engagement continuum, excellent, agentic engagement, excellent, levels of engagement of what you learned, excellent. It all bogs down to the student's mindset and emotional state. Meaning and emotion, wonderful. Kids cannot learn unless their emotional needs are taken care of. Excellent. All right, thank you. Next, please. All right, so we spent a lot of time talking about learning intentions and success criteria. And the reason why we did this is because they drive our learning tasks about what we're going to be learning. So that's why on the second day, we spent a lot of time unpacking how do you write an effective learning intention and how do you write effective success criteria. Next, please. So what specific factors or practices support learners in answering these three questions? Where am I going? How am I going? And where do I go next? Now, before we go on to the next slide, just remember that learning intentions and success criteria go with one another, and that we always begin with what I'm learning, why I'm learning, and always ending with how do I know when I've achieved it? That also seems to answer the question, where do I go next? So what do you think that concept might be? Can you write it down? What do you think? What are the practices that help these? What do we need to have that it's very specific to help these three students answer these three questions? Go ahead and put that in your chat, please. Teacher clarity does come with it. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was mine.
Learning goals, clarity and intention. Excellent learning intention, success criteria, organization and communication, intentional task, stated learning goals. Okay. Go ahead, Bailey. It's actually, next, it's actually the success criteria. And the success criteria, just to let you know, is the end point. It allows students to know in the end how they mastered that success. Now, this has an effect size of 0.88 by itself. And what that means is that's about 2 years worth of learning. So within 1 year. So if you have learning intentions and effective success criteria, you can really hone in making sure that things are very clear for students. Now, on a previous slide, I had shared on Tuesday with folks, and these were the new teachers, that the success criteria had about a 1.13 effect size. That is still true. That is, if you're co-constructing the success criteria. If you're co-constructing the success criteria, you're going to have an effect size of 1.13. Now, what does that mean? What does co-constructing mean? Co-constructing means, for instance, you're giving student exemplars. You're giving them exemplars of student papers that or something they've written or math problems. And you're asking them to explain to you why these are the correct answers. How did people go about the thinking and what got these answers to be correct? And when you're co-constructing that success criteria with folks, what ends up happening is that it raises that level to 1.13. All right, next, please. All right, so let's take a couple of minutes and let's unpack how does success criteria help us answer the question where I'm going by helping learners do what? Let's unpack what this means. So let's take a few minutes to take a look at this. What if success criteria doesn't answer the why students will benefit from learning this? Your success criteria are going to tell you where you're going to go, but what ends up happening is it's your learning intention, just to let you know, Jordan, that hints towards the why. So in your learning intention, you want to put a little bit of the why. So we had talked about on Tuesday about some of those learning intentions. For instance, I just wanted to answer this question that talks about, I'm learning how to, so that blah, 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 blah. It hints towards that way, it begins to put together that learning progression of where you want to head. And then your success criteria are going to answer how you're going to know that you've achieved the what.
Gotcha. Thank you. Yeah, I was just curious because, I mean, I'm not a math teacher, but I'm thinking of the kids who, like, success criteria is, you can successfully implement the quadratic equation, but then you still have those kids that are like, but why am I learning the quadratic equation in the first place? And
that is a wonderful question, Jordan, and I appreciate it. And I love where I don't know where you are, but it looks beautiful wherever you are. But yes, the learning intentions often hit on a little bit of the why. So it's always, I'm learning, I'm learning, or I'm doing this, I'm learning so that, because of this, this, and this. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. Have we had enough time to go over some of this? Do we think we got it?
Yes.
All right. Thank you for the yes. All right. Next, please. All right. It helps to retrieve background and prior knowledge. Next. It identifies the tool to engage the learning. Next. It monitors their progress. Next. It seeks feedback. And it recognizes when they have met the learning intentions. And this is why the success criteria are important. All right, in our next thing, what we're going to talk about, can we just hold it here for 1 second? What we're going to talk about clarity is that learning is directly related to the rigor and engagement of the learning task. And that's why there has to be alignment. And we spent a long time unpacking how do you write an effective learning intention on the second day when we were together. And then what does it look like to write a success criteria? Because that's very, very important. And establishing from there how your tasks are going to look like. You don't start with the task first. You always start with the what you're learning, the why you're learning, and then you go to how you're going to get there. After the how you're going to get there, then comes all the activities to demonstrate that you've met the how, that you'll know it. Now, before we go to the next slide, hold on for a minute, is that rigor. Just I wanted to share with you, rigor, and this is a new way to think about rigor, is that sweet spot for any individual student between complexity and difficulty. And we're going to unpack that a little bit. Next, please. This is an example, click please, of something that's difficult. Could you imagine learning how to drive and driving on a road like this, Chihuahuas? All right, next, please. This is on something that is very complex. It's a complex highway. Now, where do we find next the hinge point between something that is complex versus difficulty. We're going to leave it here for a minute because I want to unpack that and give you an example. How many of us, just a show of hands or whatever, learn to drive with their parents? I learned to drive with my poor dad. Okay. I almost gave my dad a heart attack in the process. Okay. I think my dad eventually hired my uncle to make me stop driving, or hired someone else, because my poor dad just, it was all in Chinese. It was, okay. All right. So I want to talk about this. Rigor is that hinge point. And what I mean by that is that you still keep the task complex, but how you differentiate it is how you meet your students where they are +1. And what I mean by that, you adjust the difficulty. Let me give you an example. All right, let's say I'm Denise Dunham, okay? Or let's say I'm from oh, Lord have mercy. I'm with Amy Russ's group, who's been totally amazing. And let's just say that I am those two groups of people, and I am race car drivers. The task is that we're going to parallel park. And then let's say I'm Chen, okay? So when Chen learned to parallel park, same task. It was on a big flat road, okay? It didn't have the computer thing back then. So my dad put little baby cones, and he actually stepped out of the car and he said, back up. Stop right there, Lisa. Now quickly turn the wheel. Then turn the wheel, and I still ended up in the grass, okay? But if I'm someone like Dee Dee, or the amazing people from Amy Russ's people, I may be doing it on a hill, okay? I may be doing it on a hill on a very tight spot. So the difficulty has been raised, but the task is still the same. So someone like Lisa Chen needs very big cones and a father to stand outside to say, slow down, speed up, go this way, go this way. Whereas someone like Dee Dee, I kid you not, is an amazing race car driver. She can do it on the hill with her eyes closed with two cars this close together, okay? So I've adjusted the difficulty. Next, please. So what I wanted to share with you, that adjusting the difficulty of a task, again, not the complexity, allows all learners to engage in rigorous learning. This can happen. Next, please. So what this means and how this looks like is you always want to be more on the right side. Right side. As first, second, third, fourth year teacher, I felt more safe to be on the left side, low complexity, low difficulty. That's why on Tuesday, when we were going over this, we also highlighted the verbs, because those verbs, to Bloom's taxonomy, can get you to adjust some tasks that are a little bit more complex. And this is where we're going. And so let's take a look at, if you can click, 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 there'll be 4 clicks. So let's say, for instance, it's the same task. The same task is either doing some sort of brochure or some sort of facts and questions. If I'm someone, the same task, that I may need to have guided research questions, I may need to have leveled reading materials, I may need to have all these additional supports, but I'm still doing the same task. And then it goes on up higher. Or I could be I could function really well and then be able to do extremely well. And I can do my own research. I don't need to have the articles picked out for me. So again, it's the same task and it pushes kids, but you're just adjusting the difficulty to get them to think about the rigor. So just imagine the next time when you're doing a task, just have that representation of Dee Dee being just an amazing driver, or Paula S. being an amazing driver, and all the people from Amy Russ's school being an amazing driver, and then Lisa Chen having to be like needing lots of help with driving, okay? All right, next, please. All right, I want you to take some time. Take a look at these 2 examples. Both of them are asking the same thing, adding and subtracting. Tell me in your chat, which one is a more rigorous task and why? Excellent. Yes, because it requires more skills. Because I have to think about it. It's more complex. There's more rigor. It doesn't come naturally. You guys are amazing. It requires a process, more independent thinking. It's a word problem, very high level thinking, more steps, not just love it, not just memorization, problem solving, excellent. And I think this is where Cheryl and Paula are going to be very, very proud of me, okay? That number one does more of the procedural thinking when it comes to math, because it's very easy for us to learn the procedures of 2 + 5, and we can count them on our fingers. And you know that some children count them on the fingers, or they draw little sets, they draw little toothpicks. And here I think Dr. Paul and Dr. Cheryl Gray are going to be proud of me. Whereas number two, you're starting to get more into the visualization. I cannot talk today. I'm so sorry. Visualization of math and the conceptual thinking of math and the procedural thinking of math. So it's asking students to take the same information, but you're moving the rigor of the task to make sure that they understand what it means to add and what it means to subtract. And if you actually do this problem, it's by Hattie Fisher and Fry. The really cool thing about this particular thing is that the numbers end up the same. And some of my students actually did this. And I did this both in 5th grade, and I also did this in 7th grade. And for my kids in 5th grades, those that needed a bit more challenge, they started to put together in their heads for me, kind of like the formula, and they tested it out with all different numbers. And they were saying, it keeps on equaling the same number, Dr. Chen. And so they started to kind of come out with their own process and thinking of why that was. So they were doing some algebraic thinking in the 5th grade, whether or not they knew it. I was sneaking it in. And so that's just really fun and neat to do. So this is an example of how you can take a regular task and make it more rigorous. Next, please. All right, this is another example. Take a look at it. All right, tell me, which one do you think is more rigorous and why again? Number two, because I have to do it, think, retell, incorporate different types of learning. It makes the student explain or display the activity. It makes you explain. I would say that you still have to have background knowledge in number two, because you need to put certain numbers on the number line and to know the sequence of numbers. You have to justify number two. Yes, number two is more complex because you have to think about both visualization of where the numbers go on the number line, and you have to explain your reasoning. And it's not procedural. That is excellent. Now, I've been guilty of this, and this is where my math specialist and being in a professional learning community really helps. Yes, when I first started teaching fractions and doing equivalence and also trying to find a common denominator, I used the butterfly method. Yes, it is. It's called cross product or the butterfly method, because I just wanted to make it easier for the kids to understand the steps and not confuse them. But let me tell you what ended up happening. When the numbers got more complex, when I started to go into word problems, forget about it. And when I was adding 3 fractions, they were trying to draw the butterfly in all different ways that did not make sense. So I had to rethink about the way that I was teaching the kids math, and had to back up and say, you know, I may need to take more time to do more representation of what this actually means and to break it down. And so both very similar problems, one just has a little bit more rigor than the other. And instead of students just memorizing how to find a common denominator and adding things, and you know, you draw the butterfly, who knows what I'm talking about cross product. I just want to make sure that I'm very clear about this. Cheryl, can you unmute yourself and explain it to just folks in case we have, because I mean, a lot of people know, but just in case, if you don't mind.
No, it's just a procedure for finding common denominators that probably many of us were taught in school. So it's just a procedure. There's no understanding behind it. As Dr. Chen said, you're just doing it because it works. And that's why a lot of people hate math, because they had to remember all these rules, and then rules start getting mixed together and they have no understanding of why they're doing what they're doing or why it works. So in that first example, the students are being told what to do. So there's really not a lot of thinking involved there. You either know how to find a common denominator or you don't, but you've told them, we're going to order this by finding a common denominator. So you've kind of cut off their thinking process and ability to get into the problem, versus the second one where you can use whatever strategy you want. So a lot of you were listing that as well. And I agree. I see someone mention proofs. Like I remember learning geometry, and I had gone from algebra, where I was a very good memorizer and a procedure follower. But then when we got to geometry, that was a whole nother ball game about understanding. So keep that in mind. If you are a math teacher, sometimes it is quicker and easier to teach a procedure, but you've got to remember your students may not hold on to that if you just keep dumping all of these procedures in their heads with no understanding.
Yep. And I went through that because as the numbers got more complex, they did not know what type of insect to draw anymore, literally. And it was no longer a butterfly, or it was a butterfly that looked very, very bizarre. Okay. And they still did not get the right answer. So I felt I did a disservice to my kids. All right, next. Please. All right, this is an example of a raft, but this is Antonetti and Garver's raft. And what it is that you're taking something you're taking a task and you're making it more complex, and you can adjust the difficulty however you wish to do. I've seen this being done, for instance, with kindergartner students. For instance, I've seen this done in a kindergarten first grade class in which the teacher is reading a story. It's about listening skills. Then they ask the kindergarten the students to please draw what they just heard as though they're explaining it to their baby sister. And then after they're done drawing that, then they have to explain it to the teacher or explain it to someone else what that drawing meant. And it was very interesting because I also did this with smaller kids and asked them to do it to a bigger sibling. And so the drawings were completely different. And you got to see what the kids were thinking. And this is much better sometimes than just saying, can you tell me what it is? Because it makes the task just a little bit more complex, and it pushes their rigor. Next. All right, what I want to share with you, oh, wait, slow down, please. What I want to share with you is just a regular Venn diagram. Next, please. Let's say in this Venn diagram, you're asking them to compare Arizona and Arkansas. Normally in a Venn diagram, when you're just comparing, this is just a plain Venn diagram. You're putting things about Arizona, things that are about Arkansas, and then you have something in the middle. And that's where they're similar. Let me show you, before we move on, let me show you Antonetti and Garver's version of a Venn diagram that makes it more rigorous, that takes it a notch, that is actually becomes now a conceptual map. Next, please. They put 4 lines in here. All right, slowly click, 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 and I'll tell you when to stop. Go and click. John McCain, wait, Bill Clinton. Now, what are John McCain and Bill Clinton, what do they have in common? They're both what? Click. Presidential candidates. So you're asking the students to read something about both Arizona and Arkansas, and you're asking them to put down, and then you're asking them to draw the theme that makes it similar. Go on, let me show you the other examples. You have lettuce, citrus that grows in Arizona, soybeans, next, and cotton, and next, and beef. that are common. However, the common theme about this is, next, agriculture. So you're taking this task of which they're reading stuff and you're making it a little bit more rigorous. Let's go on to the next one. So they're researching cactus and hardwoods. So what is the theme behind this? What is the concept? What is the thought behind this? Next. This happens to be native plants. Next, please. Cowboys in Arkansas, Spanish and French traders. So what are they? They happen to be pioneer figures. So this is one way to take a Venn diagram and to change it up a bit. Let's go on to the next one. You can reverse the Venn diagram. Just hold on for a minute. You can reverse the Venn diagrams and already come up with things that are already listed. So you're going two different ways. The one before was more details to tell them what is the conceptual theme. You're seeing if they can draw the concept. This one, you're giving them the concept and you're telling them, maybe read two different articles and tell me who are the presidential candidates and can you find that anyone in between? So next, please. John McCain, Bill Clinton. This one you've named it agriculture. Same thing, lettuce. Go on. Citrus, soybeans, cotton, native plants, cactus, hardwood, cowboys, and Spanish and French traders. So this is an example of how you take a Venn diagram, and even within that Venn diagram, you can make a conceptual map and you can flip it around. You could either have, and then with your students, for instance, who may not be, please back, who may not be, could you go back? Could you go back one, please? Thank you. And back one more, please, if you don't mind. Who may not be conceptual thinkers, right? You can do this both different ways. So I just wanted you to know you can do this both two different ways. Click, please. All right. The next thing that we're going to be talking about is also some examples of challenging tasks. So this again is the task that we saw on the quadrant plane, if you saw on the complexity in which you moved up the levels of difficulty. And one was making a brochure about going to a zoo and finding an adaptation. The other one was listing 5 or 7 questions that people might have about animal adaptations and writing an F and Q. But depending on where the level of reader the person is, you may have to scaffold it. You may have to have different types of different texts, but both are complex tasks. And what you're doing is you're just adjusting the level of difficulty. Next, please. All right, how do we make learning tasks? Learning tasks should provide evidence of learning and making thinking visible. So there's always clarity in everything that we do. This has been our theme about clarity. So how do you make these tasks visible? How do you make things very clear? Next, please. Let's take a couple of minutes and let's fill in this chart and let's think about this chart. This work is actually from Richard Church and Morrison. And what this work actually does, just to share with you, is that they come up with a book, what's called Making Thinking Visible. And this is how you make student thinking visible. Let's take a couple of minutes before we guess out what some of these answers are. Oh, I love your comments. Thank you. The great twist on Venn. Thank you. All right, are we ready? Thumbs up this way, thumbs down, no. All right, thank you. Next, Bailey. All right, so ask students to observe and describe what they see. Next. Build explanations and interpretations. Next, please. Reason with evidence. Make connections. Next. Consider different viewpoints and perspectives, and that's what that raft did. Capture the big picture and form conclusions. And that's what we were trying to do with the Venn diagram. We went from one place to another place. One place to another place. We were having the details and then asking them to form the big themes. And then we went from themes and picking out the little details. And promote inquiry or the asking of more questions. So this is how we make student thinking visible, by including these thought processes in the tasks that we do. All right, next, please. The one thing I want to show you, and this actually comes from the work of work from China, and this is this is both taking the brain coding, the brain encoding and the brain decoding of, as we're going through this exercise right now, and we're looking at a visual image, we're drawing prior knowledge or seeking that prior knowledge that we have before and making sense about it. And so I just wanted to show you a picture of what's going on in our brain right now. And this comes out, just if you were interested, it comes from the University of China, and it's some really great stuff. But it talks about what we had talked about earlier, the science of learning with the encoding and decoding. And so the exercises that you can also use with students also retrieves some prior knowledge as well with them, and also reinforces the concept that you want to do. Next, please. All right, clarity strategies. How do we make things more clear? Take a couple of minutes. Let's try this again. Okay, are we ready? Are we good, or do we need a little bit more time? All right, thank you. All right, next, please. Teach the content to clarify. Model the concept. Connect the concepts to a personal event or story. Before we go on to the next one, that's the emotion, the making the meaning that Patricia Wolf was talking about. Next. Facilitate a discussion or a debate on the topic. Put the content in historical perspective of why it has meaning, why it's relevant, why it's important to the student. Next. Illustrate the concept for others. Make your thinking clear for others to be able to know and do. And use metaphors and analogies. That takes it to another step. All right, now before we go on to the next thing, okay? Cheryl's actually going to share with you some of the strategies in Antonetti and Carver's work. And with Antonetti's and Carver's work on the 8 dimensions that make an engaging task. This will take us, she's going to model it. We're going to talk about it before releasing you to the strategy. Now, what I'm going to try and do, I'm going to try and, Bailey, do you mind? Can we try and switch? Because I need to do something to help Cheryl. Do you mind to switch? To see if I can.
There you go. I stopped sharing, so you should be able to.
Okay. And I appreciate all of your help. And
no problem.
Excuse me. All right, let me get to the. Thank you, guys. Now, can you all see this? Okay, and Bailey, thank you, and please excuse me for my technical difficulty. That was another Lisa Chen. This is the real Lisa Chen, okay. All right, Cheryl, you want to take it away?
All right, thank you, Dr. Chen, for sharing with us the information on clarity, rigor, difficulty versus complexity. And as Dr. Chen said, we're going to spend the second half of our time here together looking at the 8 characteristics of engaging learning tasks. So when you're thinking about engagement, remember that it's multidimensional, okay? So you're going to be addressing emotional engagement, cognitive engagement, and behavioral engagement. And you want students to have all 3 of those things, not just 1 or 2 of the 3. You want all 3 of those things to occur so they can actually have that significant learning take place. So we want our students to be actively engaged, not just compliant in completing the task that we have chosen that match our learning intentions and success criteria. So if you're looking at this list of 8 things, and you may be thinking to yourself, I cannot create a task that has all 8 of these things. And that's not what we're going to be asking you to do. research has shown after walkthroughs that they've observed in classrooms, if you have at least 3 of these things within a task or the task that you're doing in your room, cognitive engagement's going to happen about 85% of the time. Now, if you only choose 1 of these things as part of your task, then that percentage goes down to 4%. So again, as we're working today, don't feel overwhelmed that you have to have all 8. You want to have at least 3. So we're going to dive into these right now. I'll kind of go over them with you and share some examples that I have used in my own classroom or have seen. And then I'll also be asking you to share some ideas that you may have seen or done in your classrooms. Okay, so be ready to chat or unmute. We'd love to hear your voices as well. So Dr. Chen, you can go to the next slide.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right, so one of the 8 characteristics or 8 things that we want to look at is clear modeled expectations. And this is what we talked about on Tuesday. This is that teacher and student clarity. This is the learning intentions. This is the success criteria. This is your students know what success is going to look like when they complete this task. Okay, and Dr. Chen mentioned this earlier as well. If you're giving a task, can you show them an exemplar? Can you show them an example or a model of what it is that you're looking at so they know exactly where they are going? We don't want them guessing at what the target is. All right. And I'm going to stop after the first 4 and have you guys put into the chat versus stopping every single time, if that's okay. So just kind of be thinking about things as we go. All right, so for emotional safety, Heather talked about this on Tuesday, creating that classroom climate. It has to be a positive classroom climate. It has to have a sense of community. Your students need to know that it's okay for them to make a mistake, and that if they do make a mistake, that it's, everyone's going to take that opportunity to learn from it. So we want to make sure that we have our norms established, our routines established, and that we are constantly working on cultivating that classroom climate. And, that could be morning meetings, that could be part of responsive classroom, but that's not something you just do at the beginning of the year. That's something that you work on all year long. I mean, there's one quote I love, no significant learning occurs without significant relationships. So, and that's not just between you and your students, that's also student to student as well. So your students have to feel safe emotionally in order to connect to your task and for that significant learning to occur. All right, the next one's a personal response. So thinking back to those math examples, Dr. Chen, if you want to click back to those that we talked about. You can see the first one doesn't really allow for a lot of personal response. There's one answer there. There's one way to get to that. Whereas the second one, I've got some choice, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But I can personally respond to this how I want to, and I'm exploring it and I'm making connections to it. Okay, so you want to make sure that students can personalize the learning to themselves, again, making that emotional connection to help them build that cognitive connection as well. Thank you, Dr. Chen. We can go back to okay. And the fourth one is a sense of audience. So why are they doing this? And somebody mentioned this earlier, Jordan mentioned relevance. That is so important. Why does it matter besides the teacher wants me to do it or the grade book wants me to, I'll get something in the grade book from doing this. So who's an audience for the work that we're doing? Why does it matter? You could be working on community-based projects or service-based projects. This example was great. So, you're given an audience for each one of these tasks that you're going to do. I know I've seen students, write persuasive letters to a principal if they want to change something within the school, or maybe they're writing a letter to a business for some reason, but you want to give them that relevancy piece with who could we do this for? All right, so I'm going to stop right here. We're about halfway through. And I would like you to put in the chat, or we'd love to hear your voices if you're comfortable unmuting, and share any of the tasks that you've done or tasks that you've seen or participated in that include one or more of these top 4 things that we just talked about.
We've had students create a law or executive order on COVID this past year. Wow, that's really cool. I do several rafts with my students. I love the idea of the law or executive order on COVID.
I guess I'm going to say something about cultivating climate because for me, that's a big thing. Sometimes I've had some teachers who have said to me, never admit to your students when you make a mistake. But I think that's about the worst mistake you can make.
Yes.
Because when you make a mistake, you're showing them you feel safe with them on making a mistake, and they feel comfortable with you. From day one, you start, like I told you before, I'm a singing person. Everything has a song to go with it. And when we start out the day, that's the first song is Get Ready the Brain Smart Way. And we get all ready, and then we rise and shine. And then, getting that energy going and feeling safe and expressing it in whatever way they want to, as long as we don't hurt anybody else. It's starting that every day. They feel more comfortable in doing, and me being silly. For example, like when I tell a story, like I don't know how many of you have ever read The Recess Queen. Mimi Jean, The Recess Queen, because when the little girl is going and says, I like ice cream, I like cake, I'm going around the classroom and I'm acting like I'm doing the thing. I'm comfortable with doing that with them, and that makes them comfortable with being silly and taking chances and not being told, hey, that's not okay. Because I'm an energetic person and I'm going to be out there doing it. And if they're not, well, we try to encourage. If they are, building that community, they feel so safe in those silly little moments. It goes into everything else that they do. That's what I got to say.
Thank you for sharing that with you. Thank you for sharing that with us. Cheryl, there was a question on here, and you guys have such wonderful examples about student work, announcements every day using the rafts. That I've seen that. There was a question about when we were talking about the math example, and could they start off with what was on number 1 and then move on to number 2? Or what do you suggest? What do you suggest?
Personally, I'm not a big proponent of telling them what to do first. I like the more exploring, and that kind of it leads right into the next one, learning with others. So if you gave that example too, and students are exploring with their own numbers, what's happening when I add one to this number and take one away from this number, then I'm going to talk. So say Dr. Chen and I are in the same group, we're going to compare. She picked 2 different numbers than me, but we can come together and talk about the work that we did. What are the patterns that we noticed? And Dr. Chen had mentioned her work in a 5th grade classroom, I believe. Then they're starting to come up with their patterns and maybe a formula that they see coming together. So that's when you can have those conversations. But that first thing, you're not getting any conversations really out of that. That's one answer, one strategy. So I am more comfortable with starting with students thinking and how they're going to come into something versus just giving the straight, here's one answer, one thing. So that learning with others piece is huge. It's part of the 5 C's of Virginia, that collaborating time. So you want to make sure when you're thinking about your task, are you building that into that task? Are you giving them time to talk to each other? Because they can learn so much from each other. You don't want to be the center of the learning. You want them and your community to be learning from each other as well. But that also goes back. I'm sorry, Dr. Chen, go ahead.
No. All I would want to say is that, Cheryl, like, it took me a long time because I was stuck in the butterfly method because I felt more safe doing it that way because I didn't want to get the kids to have the wrong answers. And it took me a while to kind of let go. And I think that this is why it's a process and it's our level of comfort. I totally agree with you, but myself, when I first began teaching and doing math, I'm going to tell you that I started out very clearly with first doing the problems and then weaving into word problems, as opposed, you and I've had this conversation, starting with the word problems first, letting students kind of fall on their own and fail, because I had to get that belief system out of my head, that it's okay for students to fail. It's okay for me not to hover over them. So this was more on me than anything else, but love those points that are being brought up. So thank you for that.
And just to go back to Tuesday too, when you are having students work with each other, though, that's another thing you need to consider as you set up your classrooms. What are your norms for that? What does that look like? What does that sound like? A lot of my experiences at the middle school level, and if you put some middle schoolers together, we might not be talking about math. We might be talking about TikToks or Instagram or whatever is the hot topic for there. Who broke up with who? So that's really important that you have those routines and procedures in place. I know one of the things that we do here in the school I'm currently at is when it's time for small group work, there's a chart paper with, this is what it looks like, this is what it sounds like. So there's that reminder, we're going to go over it again, and this is what you should be doing. And, having accountability as well when you're asking students to collaborate together. Is there, how can you assess the learning that's going on there? So, that's just kind of another side of that coin that you want to be thinking about when you're having students collaborate with each other, so they stay focused on that topic that you're assigning to them within that task. The other fifth thing, or I think we're on six now, sixth thing that we want to talk about is choice. So what kind of options can you offer students so they can, from this example, pick what voice they're using, what their product is going to be. Maybe you give them choice in who they're going to work with or what materials that they're going to use. So, as a math background person, maybe I have different manipulatives out for them to choose from. So where are they getting choice in this task? That again personalizes that learning for them. They are taking responsibility for their learning. It's not you assigning the learning, that's them taking responsibility. So I know you can do that. We talked about rafts, we talked about menus, so they have choice within, here's some appetizers, there's 3, you pick 2 from this. I know one of the other things that I did in the classroom was for homework. So everybody didn't get the same homework problems. I didn't say here everybody's doing 1 through 10. So it would be choice by points. So maybe you had to get 10 points, but there's a bunch of different problems on the paper. Some are worth 1 point, some are worth 2, some are worth 3. And you decided which problems you were going to do as long as you got to the 10 points. And that kind of goes back to that rigor too, the complexity and difficulty of those problems. Students are getting a choice and kind of where they felt comfortable with that particular concept, that particular homework. Novelty, this is super important. I read a book and I don't even remember who it was from, but one of the questions it asked is, if students had to pay or buy a ticket to come into your classroom, would they? And that's something you want to think about. What would student are you someone whose classroom they're looking forward to coming into and engaging with you, having that relationship? Would they want to be there if they didn't have to be? So, that's something you always want to keep in the back of your mind. Would they pay to come in if they had to? So novelty can help with that. And this is something, that you want to be thinking about when you create these tasks. So how can you hook them in? How are you going to engage them? So Dr. Chen did some good examples, like having blanks like that when you open your class up. So they're like, what are these words that she's trying to get us to fill in? I know the first time I ever heard Dr. Almarode speak, and this is too many years ago for me to remember, he was talking about the order of operations, and he started that with, he wrote the word breakfast on the board, and he said, let's see who can make the most words out of breakfast. So if you're like, well, how does that connect to math and the order of operations? Well, order matters when you're spelling words. So that was a connection, but it was that quick. And that's something, if a student is walking into your math class and you're saying, how many words can you make out of breakfast? They're already hooked and they're like, what is this lady doing today? Why are we doing, these word games? This is a math class. So things like that. You just want to keep kind of mixing it up. You don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again, though. So like I saw somebody mention Kahoot earlier, and I remember when that came out and everybody was on it. You know what I mean? So all of my teachers were doing it, but that novelty wears off on students. So Kahoot is great, but don't do it every single day. You want to always kind of keep them guessing, like, what's this lady going to do today for us? So I know one of the things with order of operations, we came in dressed like doctors because we were operating on problems. So our students, that was, for them, they're like, why is this lady in scrubs and a hat and, has a stethoscope? What is she doing today? Now, I didn't do that for every single lesson, but I would mix it in there when I could. So be thinking about that as you create your task. How can you do that novelty? It could be something simple, like I'm going to show a movie clip to try to hook them in, but always kind of be thinking about that. How can you keep them guessing what's going on? And then the last one we want to talk about, and then I'd love to hear some of your ideas. I haven't got to look in the chat yet, but with these last four is authenticity. So how is it relevant? And again, Jordan asked, math can be difficult to make those connections sometimes. Sometimes I know I've talked with my PLCs like, oh my gosh, how are we going to talk to them about box and whisker plots always came up. So that's a great place to collaborate with your colleagues on that. But think about what are the real world connections to this, and our students need to be seeing themselves as mathematicians, as scientists, as, marketing people, that they need to start seeing themselves in that role, and that school is helping them to get to that point, that what they're doing matters. So, how can you simulate things in the classroom? So this was a good example of that. So we're working at a nature center, and we're going to make a brochure for that nature center. And Dr. Chen did an awesome job of showing how you could kind of scaffold that task depending on the needs of the students in your room. But this has meaning. Okay, so you want to make sure your tasks have meaning. They're not just, some of my friends, we laugh, we'll call things craftivities, that they're going to make a craft, but they really it has no connection to the learning intention or success criteria. It's not promoting what we want it to. So you want to make sure that you have those authentic connections. So I will say at the school I'm currently at, our math and civics teams work together to have students create food trucks, menus, build the food truck. And they actually had a local food truck come here after they were all done, and they gave them a tour of the food truck, talked to them, and gave them all free tacos. So that made it even better. But they had a purpose for what they were doing, and they could see how things kind of tied in. They work cross curricularly to make that happen. So I'd encourage you to do that as well. If you're looking for some authenticity, maybe you want to get with some of your colleagues and make that go across content area, because our students are seeing things as separate entities, and we don't want to do that to them. All right, so chat, love to hear any of these on these four things. I know you guys have kind of been chatting as we go. If anybody would like to unmute, again, love to hear your voice.
And I see here about Mario had dressed as a pharaoh. I would have loved to seen that picture. There was mummy pulling yarn and putting mummy brains. Totally love that. What a great idea. Love the fact that when you make a mistake, you admit it. It's very much like what Denise had said earlier. It's creating that safety in the classroom that you can make mistakes. And when you make mistakes, that's how you learn. Oh, love it, Leah. I wore a different hair accessory every day this year for my students. All right, Ron Clark Academy, get your teaching on. Do the most amazing things. Yes, I'm a big Ron Clark fan. Excellent. You have a giant octopus hat, a Star Wars one. It was fun. I would love to see your giant octopus hat. I bet it was really cool. I make it a point that if I do not know something, when a student asks me, I don't act like I know the answer. I tell them I'll find out for them. That's awesome. Oh, Leah's gonna go and grab it. She's gonna go and grab it, and she's gonna show us how she looks. All right, Lydia Stewart, when I do the 5 cents unit kindergarten, I pull in cooking and we make a treat at the end of the week using what we learned about senses. This year, we couldn't do that due to COVID. Yeah, but wow. I bet in previous years, it was delicious.
Thank you guys so much for sharing these things. We appreciate your participation.
And then it says right here, teaching states a matter, the freeze pop experiment. Yeah, I really, Mario, I want to see these hats that you guys are talking about. I can't wait to see them. All right, but well, the reason why we wanted to, and thank you, Cheryl, the reason why we wanted to talk to you about this is because we're modeling these engaging tasks so that in the next activity that we're going to be doing, this is an activity for those of you who are with us on Tuesday. We're actually going back to that activity. And in a few minutes, Bailey, who is completely awesome, who's my lifesaver because I'm having technical difficulties. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, Bailey, is going to release you guys into no more in groups of 4. You're going to be working on the items that we did, because on Tuesday, we created learning intentions and then success criteria and then task. And one person's going to be the recorder, one person's going to be the timekeeper, and one person the facilitator, and one person is going to share out the information. You're going to have 20 minutes. Bailey is also going to drop in the chat box. She's going to drop the activities. And once you've been assigned to that group, you want to go to that particular slide and work on there. I want to make sure that you guys know that there's certain slides. I want to say there's about 4 slides in which you guys will have 2 slides because the people in your groups actually wrote so many wonderful success criteria. So I wanted you guys to have space. And so your task is to look at the task and see if they are in alignment. If they are, great. And then decide under which one of those 8 categories they could be. They could be some more than one category. If not, please rewrite the task. And then also put, like I said, next to each task, dimensions of what they are. They could be more than one, like Cheryl had told us. And then please, as a group, also add one more additional task and label the dimensions as well. All right. Oh, am I missing the hat? All right, so Bailey has just dropped the slides. Those are the slides. And then in a few seconds, she's going to start releasing you to your groups. And do we have any questions about the directions before you guys are all released into your wonderful groups? Unmute if anyone has questions, please.
Leah, can you speak so that you show up in the speaker?
Yeah.
bar?
Wait, Leah, I want to see you with your hat. Are you the one with the octopus hat?
I am, and I've got it on right now.
Ah!
And it is, all of his legs are moldable and bendable, so I can like switch them around. And yeah.
Oh, I totally
my
love
God.
that.
I
totally
want that
love
for my
that.
marine ecology class.
I have I have a good friend in Michigan Michigan City, Indiana, who actually makes hats for a living. And she made this one specially for me. And I have probably, I don't know. I mean, as I said, I wore a different headpiece pretty much every day
my
throughout the
gosh.
entire school year. I teach high school, so there were days where I'd like wear an odd day and then an even
Yeah.
day. But yeah, so this was one of the favorites. And I actually have a yearbook photo a couple of years ago where I was wearing this one. I always wear different ones in the yearbooks too. I have a giant fly. I have
That's so great.
Harry Potter. I mean, you
That's
name
so
it. She
great.
just makes me hats, and I just have fun with it because life is too short to take myself so seriously.
But that's what a great way of novelty, because I bet you anything, every single day your kids are lining up trying to figure out what hat you're going to wear next. That's
It was
awesome.
particularly
the
fun
hat
on
that I
the
did.
school spirit
All right,
days
who's
because
the-
I always did one school spirit theme too. So
All right, someone said they also had a hat too.
Yes, it's Mario.
Hi.
Oh, he's got his
That's a
pharaoh
pharaoh.
hat. There he goes.
Okay.
So with my pharaoh hat like that, but I couldn't make mine, so I just bought this off of line. So I made this, and naturally I had things attached to it that talk about my culture, my background, my family, whatever movies, whatever I like attached to the hat. And the kids also got to make their own cultural hat, and it was fun because they got to share a little about themselves, and I got to know about them as well. So they got to have fun with it.
You guys are already, you guys are so amazing. You're already walking and breathing and living Antonetti and Garver's 8 dimensions. All right, so someone said on there that the slides aren't edible. At being able to edit, I cannot talk today. So once we are released into, I'm gonna throw up the activity.
All right, I guess we'll share since no one wants to.
No, Mario, I feel really bad. Go ahead and share it. Let me get us back to where we're supposed to go. Okay.
That's awesome. You're good. So we were group 8. We're on slide number 11. So if you don't know where we are, we're there. All right. And we kind of went through and we added actually, I think 2 more tasks on there that we felt that should have been necessary to add to the tasks for them. So we added research expectation of running a marathon. While they did talk about they want a nutrition plan and they want all of that stuff, they did not actually put in an area where they need to research what is needed for the marathon to become successful. They need to run the marathon at least once or twice prior to the actual marathon. So for that one, we said it was choice and emotional safety and personal response. And I think the emotional safety one is you have to be able and willing, and you feel like you're safe about this and you can do this. So
Sorry, Mario, I'm trying to pull this up. What group were you in?
group 8, we're on slide 11.
Okay, can you guys
There you
see
go.
slide 11 now? Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Go ahead. Yep.
And then the research expectation one said it's a clear or modeled expectation, emotional safety and choice. So they have to know what's happening. So it's a clear expectation of what they need to do. The create a nutritional plan, we did say it's a personal response and a choice, but it's also a learning with others because unless you're a nutritionist and you're an expert in this, you might have to contact someone who might have done this before and speak to them about it and see what they can tell you about a nutrition plan. Plan the training route. This is a choice and a learning with others as well. Someone can tell you adding this to your route will help and taking this away will not help, and so on and so forth. Let's see. The first one we said practice the training exercise. So we said it's a choice, authenticity, clear modeled expectation, and novelty. So I think for that one is a little bit self-explanatory.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mario, for sharing with us. Is there another group that would like to share? You guys did a really great job on these. Any group? Dee Dee, you can't smile and not share.
Okay, we were group 3.
Okay.
And we were talking about learning how to play the piano as a way to care for myself, and looking at the success criteria. We felt that some of the things need to be a little more specific. So we made some adjustments to some of them and then added a few. We said to research and create a checklist of 5 different relaxation techniques to give them a clear expectations, and to give them some choice about which relaxation techniques they wanted to research more of. Then we went to present and model as a group the techniques that would give them a sense of audience, not just to the teacher, but to the other classmates, and also learning with others, working together. Then we had watched a video of a musician and identified the techniques for relaxation that we may have seen inside the video, which would give authenticity you know, to real life, things that a musician might use. And then create a journal of mindfulness practices and document 1 or 2 relaxation techniques
Oh, I like that. That's
and
great.
write about its effectiveness. That would give them personal response and emotional safety, because it's personal. It's not something that
Yes,
would be shared
nice.
with everyone. And then develop a routine of 3 new relaxation exercises to use during daily life. For that would give them the clear expectations. It would give them novelty because it's something different they
Mhm.
had not done or that they haven't seen. And then also gives them choice about, you know, how, where they're doing it, how they're doing it, the way it's been done. And the last thing was we added, because we didn't know how to add it, is to reflect.
No, it's okay. I think it's right here, right?
Yes, reflect on how the relaxation technique has helped you in other areas of your daily life, which would also be a personal response and emotional safety.
That's excellent. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. All right. So let's go on. Can you guys see this? I just want to make sure that everything's clear. Thank you. All right. So from today and from that particular exercise, so what we did is we talked about a whole bunch of things today. We went from about the brain learning to learning task and success criteria. Then we learned a lot from Cheryl Gray, and we talked about a lot of the 8 different types of dimensions when it comes to a task. But before that, we also talked about some emotions and that how that ties in, the importance of success criteria, and also the various guidelines of what it means to have something rigorous. So at this point in time, as a closure, please, let's think about one engaging task that you'll try. Think about that, take some time to do that. Now, number 2 is the right level of rigor for my students is like blank because of blank. And based on what you've experienced today and for the last couple of days, how do you think differently now about teacher clarity? What does it mean now for you? So take a couple of minutes, think about this, and then decide whatever answer you want to put in to jot it down. You can do 1 in your answer. You can just choose 1, or you could do 1, 2, and 3 and jot down your answer and put it in the chat room, please. Wow, I'm hearing room transformations. Using student language and making goals clear. Learning menus. I know that clarity is intentional. I see a flexible seating. Developing it progresses and builds. Choice boards and hyperdocs. Number 1, providing more choice. I always try. Donna says she's going to try to aim for novelty. Charlotte is going to set clarity. Providing choice along with voice and choice. Choice boards. Rigor is like lifting weights. You just need to develop the right muscles. I love that. You guys have some really great answers. Work on more real world connections. Number 1, opportunities for students to model or present a skill. Katrina said, reflect on my lessons and see where I can incorporate more engaging tasks. Public student art show and promote their art show. I love it. And you even then put the criteria of what it follows under. Wow, this is an overachiever, Katrina. Excellent. Mario, performance task with choice. All right, Lydia. Rigor is like gardening because you need the right seeds in place so your garden can bloom or grow. Love it. Love it, Lydia. All right. Well, on behalf of Mrs. Gray and myself, we want to thank you very much for your time today and spending time with us both on Tuesday and also on Thursday. And we just want to end by reflecting on, can I think of key components of an engaging task? Can I create learning opportunities, incorporate the right level of rigor of my students? And can I describe the role of a teacher clarity and my learners' level of engagement? Now, we're always looking for feedback, and I'm so sorry for all of the technical difficulties that we had today, but we are so grateful for your time, because you guys could be doing anything else today, but you decided to join us. So if you could, on a 1 to 5, to see if you met the success criteria. 5, we absolutely met it. 4, we need a little bit more work. We would really, really love your feedback. We hope that you enjoy your lunch. We had a great time with you all today, and thank you for your patience, and thank you for being with us today. Thank you so much, and thank you for your patience with the technical difficulties. Thank you. Thank you. So please feel free to go on your way, and then you're going to pop back here at 1 o'clock.